Every year, a bunch of teams start the season hot, and some of them even stay that way. Marty Tallman and I are going to take a look at some of those teams who are starting hot and trying to see if there are some underrated fantasy gems that we may have missed over the offseason. More on that in just a minute on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Welcome, everybody, to the Sunday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm Erik Halterman, and joined today by my guest, Marty Tallman, co-host of the Triple Play Fantasy Podcast. Marty, how's it going? Your elbow still functioning?
Everything's going pretty well. Thank you for having me on. It's a true honor to be on the RotoWire Podcast, and going to the Detroit Tigers game later today. So I'm going to be in the field doing some field work for the show. So yeah, super excited to be here. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, you can report back if all your takes today end up being wrong. We'll retract the episode. So good that we'll know right away. It's good to have a Tigers fan on today because one of the teams we will be talking about today is the Tigers. And now some of you might be saying surprise teams. That's a little early for that. And it is a little early for that. But the main idea today is that you got to be a little bit optimistic, I think, especially in deeper leagues. And we're going to be thinking optimistically today about some of these teams and some of these players. We're going to get to maybe 6 to 8 teams, depending on how quickly we go. And I would say, maybe 1 or 2 of these teams will probably end up with 85 to 90 wins and pushing for a playoff spot. But when teams play well, that means the whole situation for everybody on the team is better. Their pitchers get more wins. Their hitters get more runs and RBI. And hey, also, some of the hitters might just be kind of good when we thought they weren't kind of good. So that's the vibe we're going for today. I think we're not going to be conclusively saying, go get every single one of these players. We're just going to be a little bit optimistic and say, hey, do we miss something here? We might have. Do you like to be an optimistic fantasy player, Marty? Does that work for you today?
My partner would definitely say optimism has never been my strong suit. But today, for you, Erik, right. I will do it.
Good. Well, we'll try to keep you optimistic for your Tigers at least, and then you can get.
That's the team I'm usually the least optimistic about, if we're being honest.
True. I do find it's hard to be optimistic about my own team. Sometimes I like other people being optimistic about my team. So maybe I'll say nice things about the Tigers. You can tell me why I'm wrong. We will get to those surprise teams in a minute. First, though, we do want to talk about the biggest headlines of yesterday. Of course, the biggest headlines of the morning we were talked about on yesterday's show, the Tommy John surgery for Shane Bieber and the likely some sort of procedure for Spencer Strider coming. We know that he has UCL damage, and those things don't tend to end well. We're waiting to see if we hear any injury reports with Kevin Gausman. That's the latest one. His velocity was way down in his start last night. I think 3, 4, 5 ticks on his various pitches. Not good at all. And this is somebody who dealt with shoulder soreness throughout the spring. I can't imagine we're particularly optimistic, even if we're not hearing explicit talk of an injury, right?
I'm going to be optimistic here, actually. I'm going to hit you with my optimism early. And the reason, and this goes back to Keegan Matheson and MLB.com. He did an excellent article last evening talking about how Kevin Gausman, this is nothing new. This time last year on April 6th against Kansas City, his velocity was down 3, 4, 5 ticks. And he was the only big difference there. He was able to pitch around it, right? He was able to locate and everything like that. Against the Yankees, clearly location was not one of his strong suits on top of the velocity problem. So after the home run, the Judge, after the home run, the Stanton, and everything like that, it just kind of snowballed into this horrible performance. And I think a lot of it has to do with we've all been burned this week. You know, the Shane Bieber owners, the Spencer Strider owners, we are assuming the absolute worst. Gausman himself, even though I don't know if going to the player is always the best thing to do when you're looking for an honest assessment. But Gausman said this is what he usually does. They joke in the dugout that he's anywhere between 88 to 98 on a given day, and he pointed to the weather as the biggest factor why his velocity was down. So it's something that's happened before. Gausman himself is not worried about it. So I'm going to be optimistic for the time being.
All right, fair enough. It's not what I was expecting, but I understand it. I guess also we could throw in here the fact that this looks so obviously like an injury situation, right? If we have a pitcher who dealt with something in the spring and his velocity's down, that's what it looks like when you're hurt.
Yep.
But if we haven't heard it by now, right, like it would have been the most obvious thing in the world for Gausman after his start or the manager after his start to say, yeah, we're not sure. We're a little worried. He's going to be checked out. If we do hear that in the next 24 hours, not at all surprised. But I guess if we make it to his next start, right, and we haven't heard any worry from a situation where worry would be so obvious, I guess if both the team and the pitcher are feeling like, no, this is just April. So the question here is there any chance you're not starting him in his next start? He gets the Rockies at home, not in Coors. So
yeah,
pretty much the easiest possible start. You got to just use him.
I would definitely, you have to use them. And at this point, there's no actionable advice we can give to the listeners. If we don't know anything about Gausman, we can just assume it's happened before. Maybe it's happening again. Maybe the shoulder is okay. But yeah, the next two outings are gonna give us all the information that we need. So keep your ear to the to the floor or whatever, if there are any injuries. But right now, we just gotta operate as if there are none.
Most injury news comes from the floor. I think that's how that works. So we will keep an eye on that one. And yeah, we got to have, there will be news or there will be not news, I think, pretty soon on that one with Kevin Gausman. I guess the only actionable fantasy advice we could give is say, go trade for him. But I'm not, even if you're optimistic, we're not that optimistic, I don't think. Right. No, I don't think I'd be, if you tried to dump him right now, you're not going to get much. And I'm nowhere near confident enough in him to say you should go get him. But I hear your lack of terror, and I am reassured by your lack of terror. So that's good. Let's move on to an injury that we know is bad. Trevor Story. It looked bad yesterday. The news was just that it looked bad yesterday. He dove for a catch attempt and just came up in very obvious pain with his shoulder. It turns out it is indeed a dislocated shoulder. It's going to cost him quite a bit of time. Could be just Pablo Reyes stepping up in Boston, which would be pretty uninteresting for fantasy purposes. David Hamilton, if he gets called up and is seeing time, I think he has been called up, actually, when Story went on the injured list. If he's seeing time, he runs in the minors. Is that enough that we should go get him?
I think right now Pablo Reyes is the guy until he's not, which is nothing you want to hear. I mean, he's striking out 35.3% of the time in his 17 plate appearances. And at best, Reyes is empty batting average, if you're lucky. And by empty batting average, I mean maybe 270, something that's not going to kill you. So I would just move on from that, from the shortstop area right now for the Red Sox. I would look somewhere else. But yeah, Hamilton, keep an eye on that. But as of right now, I can't say with any type of certainty to go get either of those guys. I think let's just wait. And
Story probably a drop in most places. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's going to be out the rest of the year. And if he's not when he comes back, what's he going to be? I mean, right. Dislocated shoulder, that's going to – the power that he might have left, a little bit of power he had left, it's probably gone until this time next year.
Yep, that sounds about right to me. I guess you were maybe drafting him for his legs, and he didn't hurt his legs. But yeah, I would be getting rid of him pretty much everywhere. A next thing on our little rundown of the headlines here is Chris Stratton got a save in Kansas City, and I count that as a headline because on yesterday's Fab show, Ryan and I talked about James MacArthur because he had gotten the save the day before in Kansas City. It seems like the Royals don't want Will Smith to be the closer or don't trust him right now. But should we be going and bidding on every other Royals reliever? Just Stratton, just MacArthur, both of them? Avoid it entirely? What are we doing here?
I think the healthy thing would be to avoid it, and let's see how the chips fall. I have James MacArthur on maybe a quarter of my teams. So going into the season, I was the most optimistic that he would be the closer. He hasn't shown me anything that will make him definitely the closer. He did mop up for Will Smith, struggling Will Smith 2 days ago to get that save. But yeah, it's pretty much, Stratton's like the next contestant on who wants to be Kansas City Royals closer. We have MacArthur, we have Smith, we have Schreiber, John Schreiber. It's a mess. It's a plain and simple. It's a mess. But the person I am, who I would think who would mostly get it, I'm going to go with James McArthur for now.
All right. Yeah, I think that seems reasonable, especially he got the chance before Stratton did. And so if you have to bid for a Royals reliever, I would only be doing it if I was pretty desperate for saves. I wouldn't be going on any of them at a price where I would need the guy to actually take the closer job and run with it, because I don't have the confidence in any of them to do that, I don't think.
Could you put a number on it? Well, if you had to put a number on James McArthur, 15-team fab, how much would you put down? Or how much would you recommend?
I think I might have said 6 to 8 yesterday on the show. I hope I remember what I said yesterday. If I already am changing that, oops. But I would go much below that now. I think maybe like
5.
3, 4, 5% on him, 2, 3, 4 on Stratton. All of these guys, and even say, John Schreiber, Nick Anderson, they would become interesting in leagues where you're regularly using a reliever who isn't going to get more than a couple saves. If it's a league with a ton of dedicated RP spots or something, sure, all these guys might get a couple, and they're actually, a decent number of talented enough relievers in Kansas City. It's just none of them are genuine closer material, I would say.
Yep, and so, relief pitching, you draft for the role, not the skills. And in this case, we're not sure about either. So I would just, if a smart move, maybe just to move on, look somewhere else.
Yep. Even if you're desperate, might not find what you're looking for here. One final bit of injury news to get to before we jump to our surprise teams. Geraldo Perdomo has a torn meniscus. This means Arizona is really thin at shortstop because Jordan Lawler is also out for a couple months after thumb surgery. Blaze Alexander time. It seems like the plan in Arizona. He wasn't somebody that we were talking about before the year, but if he's going to be playing, at least deep leaguers need to be interested in him. Is there anything more than that with Blaze Alexander?
As of now, no. I think if you need someone to fill in that middle infield spot, you just need some bodies, because I think, and I'll get into when we go into our surprise teams, I think some of us are going to be living lineup lock to lineup lock and just trying to get as much many plate appearances as possible. So if you're one of those desperate fantasy managers, as I may be in a few of my deeper leagues, I think you could do worse, but maybe not much worse. I don't recommend picking him up. This is a wait and hold. How we adjust to major league hitting.
Yeah, I think that seems right. I don't see a big talent hiding here. So I'm fine not having much interest in Blaze Alexander outside of deep leagues where you just need a guy. We're going to cut to our discussion of the surprise teams, beginning with Marty's Tigers after I tell you about Rival Fantasy. It's a new baseball season, and that means it's time for MLB DFS on Rival Fantasy. If you want to make every day draft day, try out Rival Fantasy's daily and weekly MLB Best Ball. Draft a squad for a single-day slate or an entire week of games. Play the matchups and home road splits without worrying about waiver pickups or daily roster management. Drafting isn't your thing? Rival Fantasy has Fantasy Bingo, a salary cap-free DFS game. Fill out your squad and try to complete achievements on your bingo card. Get 5 in a row or 4 in a corner to win. Then there's challenges. Pick which player will score more fantasy points in head-to-head matchups. DFS has never been easier. Go to joinrival.com/RotoWire or use code RotoWire at sign-up to get a $200 deposit match plus $25 in free entries. If you're ready to play fantasy sports made for sports fans, it's time to play on Rival Fantasy. Back here on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast, talking with my guest Marty Tallman about this year's early surprise teams. And the first surprise team on our list today is the surprise team on Marty's hat, the Detroit Tigers. The Tigers are off to a 6-2 start. Could make it 7-2 if they beat the Athletics today at a game that Marty is attending, which is why we're at an early time slot today. Tigers 6-2, to be fair, they've done it against the White Sox, the Mets, and now the A's. And remember, the caveat we had at the start of the show, we're not saying every single one of these teams is going to make the playoffs, but we're saying, maybe one or two of these teams was more interesting than we thought. Are we thinking that already in Detroit? What's the vibe among Tigers fans? Is it just we've had an easy start to the season, let's wait until we play some good teams? Or is this is our year, we're back?
I think the seasoned Detroit Tigers fan is cautiously optimistic, as I am. But I still think the AL Central belongs to the Twins until we see otherwise. Maybe they could sneak in, from one of the playoff spots. But no, I need this. I need to see more. I need to see this pitching continue on, and then the hitting, which is questionable up and down. Will the young guys step up? Will the veterans be able to sustain what they're currently doing? These are all great question marks right now. But we're having fun. We're winning ball games. I don't care if they're playing bad teams. That's the schedule. We'll take it. But yeah, we'll see when we actually have to play some of the Twins and then the Guardians. We'll see.
Yeah, I was just checking how the Fangraphs playoff odds have moved just to get a sense of, how much does this first week matter for a team's playoff odds? And it does. The Tigers heading into the season were at 29%. Compare that with the Marlins, who have had a horrible first week plus. They were at 28%, so nearly equal playoff chances. Through about 8 games, the Tigers are up to 36%, so they've gone up by 8 points. The Marlins all the way down to 5%. So the Marlins have seen their chances collapse by going 0-9, and the Tigers have gone from about 1-4 to about 1-3 just by going 6-2 to start the season. So it means something for sure. And so the question we're going to be asking today is, if the Tigers are better than we thought, why, basically? Are there players who we thought would be something who are more than something? And are there players we weren't thinking about at all who are actually worth thinking about? So let's start with some of the guys who might actually be quite good. And does Jason Foley fit into this? He might even fit into the other category because he was nearly off the radar, wasn't thought of as a fantasy ace reliever in any way, but he sure looked that way early on until he started not getting every single save. So talent-wise, definitely one of the things going right for the Tigers. But what do you think his actual role is?
So I'm going to go to AJ Hinch, the coach of the Detroit Tigers. And a few days ago, he had his quote on his no roles bullpen. Quote, Foley went through the middle of the order in the 8th. That's an example of being a little bit unpredictable. My apologies to the fantasy lovers out there. So first off, thank you, AJ, for acknowledging us. We do exist. We are real people. And we have real feelings. So thank you. But I drafted Foley in a lot of DCs. Last year he got close to, if not double-digit saves, or at least close to it. I mean, Alex Lang walks more people almost than anybody. I think he has the largest walk percentage. So anyone going into the season seeing that is just, I don't know how people fully invested in Alex Lang. So I kind of did expect this. I didn't know if it was going to be Shelby Miller or Jason Foley, but Jason Foley's power sinker somewhere between 97 to 102. Double-digit inches of movement, and he's thrown it 73% of the time. So he's just throwing what's good, and it's working for him. Mixing in that slider 22% of the time. And over the 4.1 innings, he has a 46.7 K percentage, an expecting batting average against of 100 and 1.3 x ERA. All of those are reasons why he should be the closer. But I think AJ Hinch is going to move him in and out when they need him the most, especially if the Tigers are winning games. Everything kind of starts to change, right? If the more the Tigers win, the more they're going to be looking towards the playoffs. So putting Foley in the highest leverage situation, that may be the best thing for him. That doesn't mean he can't get 15, 20 saves. That could still happen. But I don't think it's going to be as cut and dry as a number one closer.
Yeah, I think that seems right to me. I think if he ends up similar to Evan Phillips with the Dodgers, somebody who gets the brunt of the saves, as manager Dave Roberts put it, I think I could see that. Or Yohan Duran, when he's healthy in Minnesota, is used sometimes in a similar way where he gets most of them, but they're not afraid to bring him in earlier. Although maybe that's the ceiling for Foley and he could still have far fewer. How about some of the guys who are less on the radar even than him? Actually, let's move to one more who was barely on the radar. Jack Flaherty. Had some people who liked Jack Flaherty, but also plenty of people who had seen Jack Flaherty pitch the last 3, 4, 5 seasons and didn't really want him on their teams. It's too early to draw conclusions about Jack Flaherty, but good first start for him. What are the expectations there? Is if the Tigers are taking a step forward, he's probably a part of it.
Yeah, he would be a big part of it. I was fully out on Jack Flaherty in every way you could be. almost has no command. I mean, he was just walking so many people last season. Velocity's kind of all over the place, but also the St. Louis Cardinals is kind of, no one was doing well there, and now everyone's left and they're doing pretty well. So I don't know what that means, but I mean, Flaherty's
something's going on there.
Yeah, and they just gave Marmol they extended him, but anyway, that doesn't matter. Jack Flaherty. So last time out, he had 6 innings pitched, only 4 hits, 1 earned run, and no walks, with a 33% CSW. So no walks is the most encouraging thing for me. 57 strikes in those 87 pitches. Velocity was up a tick on the fastball and 3 ticks on the breaking ball. And he increased his slider percentage from 25% to 46%, which led to 9 whiffs. So if the slider is for real, I don't truly believe in Jack Flaherty. I got to be honest. Okay. I got to be honest.
The optimism has broken. We've gotten this far, 20 minutes into the show. We're
Outside
done.
of being very good looking, I don't know if I think he's a near 5s ERA, and he could blow up at any time. But we'll see a couple months from now. Can he sustain the gains he made very, very early on? Maybe he is the rookie Jack Flaherty that we all fell in love with all those years ago. But I don't think so. I think he's streamable against bad opponents on the road, and most starts at home for now.
Yeah, that matches what I was expecting, but I guess we'll keep an eye on Flaherty. If he turns into a frontline starter again, then suddenly Tigers looking much more likely to have a shot in that division.
I encourage your listeners to come at me, because that means the Tigers are doing pretty good, and I'll take it.
Yeah, exactly. Any other overlooked Tigers? Maybe is there anything in the back of that rotation? Somebody like Casey Mize or Matt Manning? Should we be having them back on our fantasy radars, or any underrated hitters that people outside of the Detroit area aren't really thinking about?
Yeah, I'll touch on Casey Mize. So last time out, and this was his first. That was his first outing in nearly 2 years. We're recovering from Tommy John surgery. I didn't know if he'd ever come back, but he went 4.1 innings, 4 strikeouts, 2 walks versus the New York Mets. Now, projections have him around 120 innings pitched with a 4.7 ERA. I think that's pretty close. I think if maybe the ERA can get down to about 4.5, I think that would be a little more than what we thought going into the year. But health concerns. I mean, he's recovering from Tommy John surgery, so even if he's doing well, they're going to pull. He's not going to pitch that much. So there's 2 ways to look at it. Is either he's going to get the Walker Buehler treatment, because the Detroit Tigers are going to make it to the playoffs. So as we progress in the year, we're going to see less and less innings, with maybe a chance he pitches a little bit in the postseason. But let's say the Detroit Tigers are terrible, right? And they just plummet. He's going to shoot all his bullets early. So they're going to let him pitch maybe until, late summer, early fall, and then cut it. So he's streamable. I think that's where he's at. Even in the 15-team leagues, I'd pitch him against bad opponents, and on the road, most spots at home. But for a number 1 overall pick, I don't think we'll ever get that out of him. But right now, he's serviceable.
All right. Well, if the Tigers have a few more guys get to serviceable, and a few more guys jump from serviceable to good, maybe we will see them make good on their early hot start.
And I do want to touch on
the playoffs. Oh, one more. Yes, give me that one
I got 2 more real quick. Matt Manning, if you want to put $1 or 2 on him for a stash, I don't know who has an open spot, unless you're in a league with injury reserves.
In which case you have a ton.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe $1 or 2. We need Kenta Maeda or someone just to fall off, just to do really, really bad for ordering him to get called up. And then just on the batter side, Mark Canha. I mean, he's playing every day for the Tigers. He's one of our hottest hitters. He's barreling the ball at 18.8% of the time, which is truly unsustainable. We all know that. But he's averaged 140 games over the last 3 seasons. So he should be in there nearly every single day. I think he's even rosterable in 12 teams at this point. But he's not. I think he's somewhere around 20 home runs and some decent counting stats is what you're going to get from Canha. But if you're in an OBP league, I mean, he's one of the gods. So keep firing him up. But Mark Canha has been a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, good call there. He's been batting 5th most games for the Tigers, which is the sort of thing we're talking about today. If you have a everyday spot in the middle of a lineup that was supposed to be not that good, and now it's kind of good, that matters. That could add, 5 runs, an RBI or something to your total. So that's why we are looking at the surprise teams today. Let's jump from one central to the other. A lot of surprise teams in the centrals, not a coincidence, I don't think, because to surprise, you have to start out with low expectations, and those are found in the central divisions. But the Pittsburgh Pirates, with a 7-2 start, they've increased their playoff odds, according to Fangraphs, from 17% to 29% just with that hot start. For them, they've actually beaten, they've played the Orioles. They're 1-1 against the Orioles. Before that, they beat up on the Marlins and Nationals. So with all these hot starts, we have to keep in mind schedule matters. But the Pirates also had a hot start last year. And it was weird because it was after O'Neal Cruz went down, and there was the thought of, wait, the Pirates actually maybe something. And when they get O'Neal Cruz back late in the year, oh, wow, the Pirates, man. Turned out they weren't something, and they didn't really get O'Neal Cruz back. So that didn't work out. Is it going to work out better this year, though? Do you think there is more going on in Pittsburgh? All those players who showed something last April or a year later, O'Neal Cruz is healthy again. You feeling the vibes in Pittsburgh?
Unfortunately not. I think if they get somewhere close to a 500 ball club, I think that's a win. I know it's a win for the Pirates organization. They're not really too concerned about ever making the playoffs, but I think for the fans and for the fantasy owners that want to see more wins from their pitchers and everything like that, I think if they do go 500, I think that would be a step very much in the right direction for the franchise.
Yeah, fair enough. I think as noted, they've only increased their playoff odds to 29%, so it's not as if they are now favorites by any means, but there are definitely some good things going on in Pittsburgh. I think starting with Jared Jones. Jared Jones was a potential sleeper pick from a lot of people during draft season, and through 2 starts, sure looks pretty good. A 35% strikeout rate against a 4% walk rate. Couldn't ask for much better of a start from Jared Jones, particularly that walk rate, because command was the question with him. There's a chance that he is quite good right away and not just a guy we like because he pitches in a nice park, right?
Yeah, I mean, rookie pitchers are very scary. So let's throw that out there. We don't know from start to start what we're going to get, but I was taking a look at the Pirates' upcoming schedule and looking to see Jared Jones. Who will he face? So, Eric, I want to play a game with you that I didn't even let you know that you're going to play, but you're going to play it. So awesome. Here are his next steps, and this is the would you start Jared Jones?
Yep.
At Philly. Let me tell. Hold on. 15 team league. I think 12. Let's start with 15 team leagues. Let's just start there. Yeah. So at Philly.
That's a tough one. I think we're starting with the one that's the answer. If I say yes, you're starting him almost everywhere because Philly is one of the toughest parks. Yeah. After his first 2 starts, I'm saying yes. I don't think the Phillies are hitting well enough that I'm that scared. Am I crazy?
I don't think that's crazy. And following down from that, it's at the Mets versus Milwaukee, at the Giants, home versus Colorado, home versus the Los Angeles Angels, and at Milwaukee. So 1, 2,
all
3,
of the
4.
rest. Yes.
Yeah. So I think he's a must pick up in every league. I don't care if it's a 10, 12, 15 team league. You got to pick him up anytime you see 17 strikeouts and 11.2 innings with the 0.94 whip. His whiff rate is 41.3%. I mean, he's just absolutely nasty. So you got to pick him up. 15 team leagues. Looks like he's a must start from here on out. Until further notice, we'll say that. Yes,
of course. He could have 2 terrible starts. I mean, the control problems could come back.
Yeah.
He could walk 6 against the Phillies. He can give up 3 homers, and we'll be talking about him very differently. But that is very illustrative. If you're someone who's thinking that you're going to use him against the Phillies in, say, a 12-team league, and he's still out there, well, definitely get him because you're going to use him for all of his next several starts. And I'd be getting him in every league. I think he needs to be universally owned at this point until we prove otherwise. On the offensive side for Pittsburgh, I mean, O'Neal Cruz, if he's just really good already, that's going to go a long way towards the Pirates making the jump all the way to playoff contention, right? Do you think he's got a chance of that? So far this season, he has an 875 OPS, but also a 35% strikeout rate. So kind of inconclusive if you were had strong opinions either way about Cruz, I'd say.
Yeah, what I would expect for him if he stays healthy, 25 home runs, around 25 stolen bases, and that strikeout rate's going to keep his batting average around 240. All of that is great. I would take that from where you drafted him, and there's even more of a ceiling on top of that we could see. So you got to be O'Neill Cruz owners got to be pretty happy right now.
Yep, and they could be super happy if he leads them all the way to the playoffs, but I'm not sure about that. Any of the lesser Pirates who have become at least sort of interesting? I noted a couple who have had either decent starts or maybe a little bit more playing time. Michael A. Taylor, Connor Joe leading off against lefties and also playing against righties. Rowdy Tellez is just a guy who I think gets underrated because he just hits the ball so hard that he's going to be okay, even if he doesn't do a whole lot else. Do you see anything in Pittsburgh here that you like?
I wish we could morph Connor Joe and Rowdy Tellez into one person.
Yeah.
And that would be absolutely incredible. And I think that would go a long way for our fantasy teams. But since we can't do that, Connor Joe, he's on the short side of the platoon versus lefties. So obviously playing time are a huge concern. If he hits 10 home runs with 50 runs, 44 RBI, batting around 240, is that rosterable? Most spots, no. Rowdy Tellez, strong side platoon, more power. Everything looks great from a power perspective. And I really bought into him in 2023, and I was very much burned. So I don't have Tellez anywhere, but 20, 25 home runs playing every single day with batting around 245. Hey, you could do a lot worse in your corner infield position, especially with he's basically free off the waiver wire. So, yeah. It's good.
No, nobody wants Rowdy Tellez, and if he's got a spot in a lineup that's better than we thought it was, again, that's the main topic today. If these teams are better than we thought they were, all their players just become a little bit more interesting. And so for a fringy guy like Rowdy Tellez, maybe that's all we need. We're going to jump to our next team after I talk to you about Vivid Seats. Finally, baseball is back this MLB season. Knock it out of the park with Vivid Seats and score great tickets to the biggest games of the year. Every fastball, every home run, and every eye-popping play of your favorite team, live and in person. Plus, with Vivid Seats Rewards, you earn rewards with every single ticket purchase. Just buy 10 tickets, then cash in your credit toward your free 11th ticket. Talk about an easy win. And here's a pro reward tip. When buying tickets for your whole group, split the bill and make progress towards your free 11th ticket even faster. From behind the dugout to the upper deck, Vivid Seats has great tickets for all the 2024 games that matter to you. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Vivid Seats, experience it live. See vividseats.com/rewards for terms and conditions. Back here with Marty Tallman on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast, talking about the surprise teams of the early season. Today, we've talked about the Tigers and Pirates. Let's jump to another team that has a 2-loss record. I'm going to go to the Cleveland Guardians. They've started out 7-2, but they also have seen their ace Shane Bieber go down for the season for Tommy John surgery, which will put a dent in their playoff aspirations. They started the season with 29% chance at making the playoffs, according to Fangraphs. They are now at 31, so they've only moved up a little bit, and I think that probably reflects the fact that they've lost Shane Bieber. So maybe there isn't much here, but a 7-2 start for a team that wasn't particularly expected to do a whole lot this season. Any of the Guardians standing out as someone who could be taking a leap forward this season?
And I think we see this a lot with the Guardians every year. We expect them not to be good, and somehow they somehow get their way into the playoff talk. If they actually paid their players, I can only imagine how good that team would be perpetually. But looking at players that are standing out now, I mean, obviously Tanner Bybee. I mean, as a rookie, he showed really good command, a really good slider. Fastball was below average. I think he's improved that a little bit with the movement. And looking to his arsenal, so he switched it up a little bit. So he's using his changeup. He increased it from 16% to 25%. So he's throwing it as much as his slider is, and a lot more balanced of a repertoire. So I think he's keeping the hitters off balance a little bit more. I know his first outing he had 5 walks, so that was scary. I didn't know kind of what to expect from there. But then when he against the Orioles, he had 17 whiffs, 9 strikeouts, and 0 walks. So he pitched 142 innings last year as a rookie, so I would expect him around that 150, 160, maybe 170 if he stays off the IL. So Bybee owners have to be pretty happy with what they're seeing right now. Absolutely.
Yeah, and with Bieber going down, maybe that means Guardians need to rely on Bybee a little bit more, leave him in a little bit longer. Maybe that hurts him for ERA and whip, but could give him just a few more innings to his workload. Certainly means they won't be, shutting him down early or anything like that. They will need Tanner Bybee for everything they can get if they're still in the race, especially late in the season. On the offensive side, anyone here stand out? I see Brian Rocchio playing every day, maybe if he is something for deep leagues, but I wasn't expecting much fantasy appeal there. Will Brennan playing against righties? Anything with any of these guys?
And this goes back to what I said earlier. Some of us are living lineup block to lineup block, So I think that's when Brian Rocchio can fill in the gaps because you have a body, at middle infield who could, at least he'll get the plate appearances. But looking at Will Brennan, strong side platoon. Overall, he's a streamer for a 15-team league. I would say he's mostly empty batting average, but he is facing his next 3 teams he plays. So he's going to be at Boston, who's all righties, versus Oakland, who are 3 righties, 2 lefties, and the lefties aren't very good. And then versus Boston again. So if you're in a deep league and you're looking for a streamer just for a week or so, Will Brennan's fine. That's my glaring endorsement. He's fine.
I could buy it. I mean, I like a guy who's got a really low strikeout rate, even if he doesn't do a whole lot else. That's one skill that I know matters and is going to help you in one area. And theoretically, it's a skill you can build on with other skills. But even if you don't, there's at least something there. We got one other Cleveland Guardian getting some mention in the comments here. Logan Allen, if he has a good sophomore season, he was decent as a rookie, 24 starts, 3.81 ERA, although an elevated whip at 140. Good first 2 starts for him, although a strikeout rate of 19%. He's not necessarily a big strikeout guy, which does hurt his fantasy appeal somewhat. But if he takes a modest step forward, that also will be key toward the Guardians remaining in the playoff hunt. Do you like Logan Allen at all?
I for how desperate we all are for starting pitchers in the deep league, Logan Allen, I think you can add him. And if he's your last starting pitcher and he has a decent matchup, I think that's fine too.
Yep. I'm not excited, but I think he is at least fine. Let's go to the Red Sox, who you talked about, because Will Brennan is facing that rotation, which is all right-handed and maybe all interesting. I have down here as potentially very good. Basically every single member of this Red Sox rotation. Nick Pivetta off to a hot start. Tanner Houck, Garrett Whitlock. I think Brian Bayo wasn't, but it's basically the whole team looked at least potentially interesting and looks to be making good on that through their first couple outings. And they've got quite a good brain trust on the pitching side over in Boston now. Craig Breslow at the top. I got Kyle Boddy from DraftKings as an advisor there. Andrew Bailey as a pitching coach. Just a lot of guys who are well respected. It's a great atmosphere to be getting better at pitching if you're already sort of interesting. So this Red Sox team off to a 6-3 start. They were basically a complete afterthought in the AL East. And this hot start has only increased their playoff odds from 26 to 31%, according to Fangraphs. But hey, close to a 1-3 shot for a Red Sox team that looked like easily the least interesting one in the AL East. Are you buying the hype around this rotation?
Yes, the rotation, and you put the Red Sox in the AL Central. I mean, they're going to be they could be the best team in the division. So being in the AL East is always kind of a bummer. But I own Nick Pivetta everywhere, and I'm loving what I'm seeing. I mean, obviously the velocity is great, a good hard slider, above average curveball, and he's pitched at least 140 innings over the past 3 seasons. And this is just a blanket statement for all of the Red Sox pitchers. Can they limit home runs in that ballpark? I can't give you that answer, but right. That's going to, as we progress over this next month or so, that's going to be the thing I'm going to be looking out the most. Are they able to suppress that hard contact in that little stadium that they currently have? But I don't know how you can look at the Red Sox and not be fully optimistic on their pitching staff at this point.
Yeah, and like I said, basically all of them already were at least sort of interesting. I don't think there's a single member of that rotation where if somebody said, hey, I kind of like this guy, I would have said, what? That guy? I think all of them you could have made cases for prior to this season. So the fact that they're already looking interesting, very encouraging if you're a Red Sox fan. How about on the offensive side? Jarren Duran off to a hot start. Tyler O'Neill, if the Red Sox get a healthy Tyler O'Neill, he would certainly not be the first outfielder to leave St. Louis and have a good career. This could be something, right, with Tyler O'Neill. But if it's the health that we're looking for, we can't really do any victory laps in early April.
Yeah, I think for him, the mental part of the game, which is something we can never measure and we don't often think about, but knowing that your team, like your manager, doesn't like you and the team doesn't want to play you and they don't see you having a future, I could see how that, on top of the injuries, that kind of probably weigh you down a little bit. So a fresh start. Yeah, so a fresh start in Boston, the biceps and the chest, the power is all still there. Yeah, can he stay healthy? Will he be able to avoid these soft tissue injuries when he is maybe stealing 15, 20 stolen bases, playing every day in the outfield? If you have him right now, you're really, really happy. Maybe in a league where you can trade, maybe go out there, see if you can get somebody with a little bit higher of a floor. But yeah, it's he's everything that you wanted to see in 2023, but now you're getting him a year later.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the trade there. A lot of the guys that we're talking about today, because we're trying to be slightly optimistic on them, I think that makes them interesting trade targets. If you can find someone who isn't particularly optimistic on them, maybe there's some potential there. Although with Tyler O'Neill's hot start and with him being, the sort of flashy player that is fun to root for because of those aforementioned muscles, etc. Maybe he's someone that's going to be hard to pry away from other teams. Other Red Sox who could be interesting, Cedar Rafaela is probably the main one to mention here, although he hasn't actually gotten off to a particularly good start, hitting 185 through his first 8 games, and has only had 1 steal. But he's somebody certainly to watch, right?
Yeah.
Were you on Cedar Rafaela at all in draft?
I have him in a couple of DCs. Right, where I thought he may just be able to fill in, and I'm starting in 1 or 2 of them. So he's playing every day. His glove's going to keep him in the lineup, so that's something you don't have to worry about. And he's a cheap source of steals at this point, even though he does have 1 in 2023 over 136 games across AA, AAA. He had 39 stolen bases. So if you're speculating on some cheap steals, maybe throw a couple bucks on him in Fab and kind of see what happens.
Yeah, sounds right to me. Let's jump back to the NL for another surprise team here. The Brewers off to a 5-2 start, having beaten the Mets, the Twins, and the Mariners so far. The Brewers have increased their playoff odds. They started at 31%, according to Fangraphs. They are now at 34%, so not a lot there. Maybe that has something to do with the fact that the Pirates have also gotten off to a hot start. In fact, the entire NL Central is over 500 right now. So much for that being the worst division. It's actually the best. That would be kind of fun if we get a 5th place NL Central team with 81 wins somehow. I think the only way we get there is probably if the first place team has 82 and they're all just in a giant pile there. But the Brewers, I can't say I was that optimistic about them heading into the season. They're always a middling team in terms of talent that got the most out of its talent because of Craig Counsell was kind of how I viewed it. Maybe that was too simplistic. Maybe there's a little bit more talent there, but not an encouraging amount. They're off to a good start, though, and they've got some good young talent. I mean, if Jackson Chourio just wants to be really good right away, that would sure help the Brewers make the playoffs.
Yeah, I see the Brewers as the National League version of the Guardians, where the front office is trying to just, try to always save as much money as possible. They don't care if they win, but they somehow keep on winning. But my optimism went out the door once they got rid of Corbin Burns for obvious reasons, right? But looking at Jackson Chourio last year, and this is in AA, he hit 22 home runs with 43 stolen bases. So, I mean, in theory, the sky's the limit for him here. The good news is he already has 2 home runs and a stolen base. The bad news is he's striking out 33.3% of the time. So will he be a 5-tool stud this year? Probably not. But if you're rostering him, I think you can expect somewhere around 15 home runs. If he really taps in the stolen bases, maybe 20, 25. maybe more if things go the way that they should be, or if they're, things go the right way. But love what I'm seeing from Jackson Chourio. Obviously, Bryce Terang is another guy that I completely wrote off. I think a lot of people wasted some fab on him last year, expected like, oh, hot start, let's get him going, and then he absolutely fell on his face. Right now he's batting .368. That's going to come crashing down for a bunch of reasons. One of the biggest ones being he strikes out nearly 30% of the time. He has increased his contact rate, so I think, maybe 240, maybe 250 if all things are going well, but he's a strong side platoon. ATC projects him for 8 homers, 21 steals, batting .240. So in a deep league, he's a fine middle infielder. And as of right now, he's tied with Jarren Duran for the most steals in baseball with 6. Unless someone I did this on the day before. So unless one of those guys got another stolen base yesterday, right now he's tied.
Yeah. And Bryce Terang may have burned some people last year, like you mentioned, because he got off to that good start. And so if you picked him up last season thinking, hey, this is the year, and then we're burned, and that makes you not want to go get him this year, I think that's probably wrong. I think he was just, he was a rookie. He had some tough adjustment period, also had some, BABIP, bad luck and that sort of thing. I think his performance may not have been quite as bad as the numbers said. So you take a young guy who's been through that experience, was supposed to be a good player. This is not somebody who's merely supposed to be a utility man type. He's supposed to be a solid regular. So he could well be getting there in his age 24 season after struggling in his age 23 season. That would be not an unusual career path at all. Also on the Brewers, Abner Uribe, if he just wants to be the guy already, he has not had a perfectly smooth start to the season, but the fact that he's been deployed as a closer, that's certainly encouraging if the Brewers are going to have faith in him. He looks like a closer with that fastball slider combination, elite velocity on both. And the Brewers certainly have been good at producing relievers in the past. So if he just wants to be a shutdown weapon, that would help them as well.
Yeah, it looks like currently he has the role, and I go back to last year, 30.2 innings pitched, 39 strikeouts. I mean, that's what you want to see from your reliever. And the last Brewer I'll touch on, Oliver Dunn, 26-year-old rookie, another strong side platoon. He's only has 21 plate appearances, but he's got a 269 XBA, 1 homer, 1 stolen base. In the minors, he walked a lot, he struck out a lot, and he hit home runs. So you look at his raw power on Fangraphs, 55 out of 55. So I don't think double-digit home runs are impossible. And I was looking at his projections, and Zips is the only one that's kind of made has shifted his plate appearances, around 400. And they see him with 11 home runs, 8 stolen bases, while batting .214. So it's not great, but in your deepest leagues, I think if you see a lot of righties coming up on the up for the Brewers, I think he'd be another one of those. You play for 4 games and you lock him in your lineup by maybe only spending $1 or $2 on him on Fab.
Yeah, he's one to take a look at for sure. Maybe a late bloomer type who might not be properly appreciated by the projections, or else he might just be not very good and is having a good first week, which is why the projections aren't very good, but worth taking a look, certainly in some deep leagues. We are going to look at a few more surprise teams very briefly. I think we've gone over the biggest surprises so far. After I talked to you about home run forecast, can certain weather conditions lead to more home runs? The atmosphere can affect how far a ball flies by 20%. Home Run Forecast measures the weather conditions at a ballpark to tell us if the atmosphere is good or bad for ball flight during a game. An index value that rates the air is created for each game and ballpark and is displayed on a scale from 1 to 10. Home Run Forecast premium site offers index values by the hour for each game, 24-hour forecasts, wind direction and speed, and even whether the roof will be open at certain stadiums. Home Run Forecast is offering a special for the start of the baseball season. You can get access to the premium site for the entire season for only $28, a savings of nearly 30%. Go to homerunforecast.com/RotoWire now to sign up. Back with Marty Tallman going over some of the early surprise teams, and I think we've gone over most of the biggest ones. We've talked about the Tigers, the Pirates, the Red Sox, the Guardians, and the Brewers. So before we just briefly mention some names from I think the Angels, Cubs, and Royals all sort of count as surprise teams. They're all off to a 5-3 start, which is more impressive for the Angels and Royals. I think the Cubs may have expected to be more or less 500 or a little bit above, but the fact that they made the Dodgers look bad at least once means we'll throw them on there. But of the 5 we talked about so far, Tigers, Pirates, Red Sox, Guardians, Brewers, I think the odds are probably 1, maybe 2 will sustain this hot start and, either make the playoffs or be right there at the end of the season. If a lot of these teams are having about a 33% chance, I think that means we can say 1 or 2 are going to be there. Who's your pick among those surprise teams? Who keeps it going? You going to go with your hat and your heart or somebody else?
I'm going to go with my hat. I don't know if it's my heart, but definitely not my brain. But anyway, yeah, I'm going to go with the Detroit Tigers. And a lot of it, I would have picked the Guardians, but with losing Shane Bieber, I mean, that's their ace. So I never would have thought I'd be saying this, but I think the Detroit Tigers it's possible they make the playoffs. Felt good saying that. Felt good saying that. I haven't said that in a long time.
Yeah. I think of all the teams that we've talked about, I think I am the closest optimistic about them. The fact that it's really the Twins is their toughest competition, that certainly helps. For me, It would be between the Tigers and probably one of those NL Central teams, but because I don't know which one I would pick, either the Pirates or the Brewers, I think I would say the Tigers are the most likely. I could see the Red Sox, too, making a wild card run. That division's so tough that I think somebody's going to win 95 games, and the Red Sox aren't going to be that someone. But I would say I'm reasonably encouraged by their start, too, which I guess means we've now said basically all the teams except the Guardians. So that was what we weren't trying to do. Remember, we're not too optimistic. Yeah. Well,
and the last factor to look at is looking at the front offices. Are they going to invest in this team halfway through the season if they do see that it's a possibility they make the playoffs? And the Tigers have, ever since they've had their owner that they currently have, he has not invested in the team outside of Javi Baez. So
right.
There you go.
Well, maybe they'll go out and get the next Javi Baez, the missing piece.
Thanks,
real quick, I know you got to get going to the Tigers game pretty soon, but we got about 5 to 10 minutes here. Any surprise names on the Angels? Are you buying anything from their 5-3 start, or is this just a first week?
First, it's the first week. I did want to talk about Mike Trout really quickly because anytime he talks about wanting to steal some bases, that it has my ear a little bit. As I put in the show breakdown, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing for his longevity for the entire season. But manager Ron Washington has given him the green light to be aggressive on the base pass. So if that's 10 stolen bases as a Trout owner, you got to be pretty happy there. Logan O'Hoppe has just been. He's been everything you thought he would be outside of those shoulder injuries. If he's able to stay on the field, I mean, he's improved everything. He's striking out less. He's walking more. His StatCast numbers are a strong red. And I don't think it's outside of the realm that he could be a top 5 catcher this year if he's able to stay healthy. So Logan O'Hoppe's been I'm not going to say it's a surprise. It's more of like, this is what I expected if he stayed healthy, and that's what we're seeing. So that's good.
It's a surprise that he's maybe doing it already.
Yes.
If he's somebody who was a pretty decent catching prospect, but because he had that disrupted start to his career with the injury, with the trade from the Phillies as well, it took a bit of time and he was off the radar for a bit. And I thought that this year might be a consolidation year and that next year he'd be good. And he might be good this year. If the Angels are to make the playoffs, they'll need him. They'll also need Reed Detmers to be actually good this year. A pretty good start to the season from him. So there could be something there.
Incredible
the
start.
Odds. Yes. Yeah. Man. And he's not someone who's been unhyped. That's for sure. The hype may have been a year early, potentially.
Yep.
Or, maybe he just had one good start. But certainly Reed Detmers could be part of the reason the Angels are better than expected, although their playoff odds, they've only gone from 17 to 19% chance according to Fangraphs. So
I think
not
that's
convinced over that. Yeah. How about with Royals, who have gone from 13% up to 22%? So maybe I should have lumped the Royals in with these other teams. They've got off to a 5-3 start. Cole Reagans, if he's an ace, that helps the Royals push for a playoff spot. Michael Garcia, everybody's sleeper. If he turns out to be what everybody thought he was, is there enough there? Are you as threatened by the Royals as you would be by, say, the Guardians?
No, outside of Cole Ragans, I don't see much from that rotation. But looking at Cole Ragans, and the number one rule of doing these fantasy shows is not talking about your own fantasy team, but I need to say I'm kicking myself in the butt for drafting Joe Musgrove over Cole Ragans in our Glarf draft. I think that's one of the last thoughts I have before I go to bed each evening. So that's to let you know where my mind's at. But Ragans 4-pitch mix. He's decreased his 4-seamer. He's throwing the cutter more. He's mixing in the slider. He's keeping the hitters off balance. 16 strikeouts and 12.1 innings. He looks really good. And Mikel Garcia, what is he able to tap into that power? And so far, he's barreling the ball at a ludicrous 20.7% of the time. So obviously, that's not going to continue. But you love to see what he's doing there. And the last person I talk about is Brady Singer. 13.1 innings pitched, 14 strikeouts, only 2 walks with a 2.43x ERA. He switched up his arsenal. He was throwing a sinker 51% of the time. Now he shut that down to 28.2. So less sinker, more slider, and he is throwing a 4-seam fastball. Last year he didn't throw it at all. Now he's throwing it nearly 20% of the time. So a lot more of a balanced arsenal for Singer, which I think is helping. And on top of the ballpark, what a great place to pitch.
Definitely.
So yeah.
Yeah, so some interesting names there for the Royals, even if, again, their playoff odds have only jumped up to 22%, but it's more than what they started with. That 5-3 start has certainly helped. One final team off to a 5-3 start. Debated whether or not they count here as a surprise, which is why we're touching on them very quickly at the end. The Cubs were supposed to be in the mix, but a good start to the season, beating up the Rockies, hanging with the Dodgers. I just throwing them on here so I can talk about Christopher Morel one more time. Do you know what Christopher Morel's strikeout rate is right now? This is the guy who strikes out all the time but does everything else. So, man, if he could only get those strikeouts down, do you know how often he's striking out?
I do know. So in 34 plate appearances, he's decreased his strikeout rate from 31% last year to 11.8 this year.
Let's go.
Woo! So 14.3% barrel percentage. I could 324 XBA. I could 30 home runs or 30 plus home runs are in his tool bag. And I think with what we're seeing with this contact rate, batting 260. The question is, can he ever develop a glove, to keep him at third base? We don't know. Probably not. They're not ready to make him a DH yet, but I could see long-term that's probably where he's going to be unless they teach him to play first. But yeah, Chris Morel's he's been absolutely incredible. And Shoto Imanaga, I want to see today he plays the Dodgers if I look at the schedule right. Yep. So we will see there.
Will he generate his first ground ball of the season today? That's the question. He had 0 in his first start, but he also only gave up 2 hits and no runs and no walks. So.
Yep, and I watched that game, and I encourage everyone to look at that box score. No one hit a home run that game. The wind was blowing in a lot. And
I was at that game. It was wild. The wind was blowing in. It was, 41 and rainy. The wind felt like it was blowing down, really. Yes. All those fly balls were just dying on the warning track.
Yeah, but you heard the crack of the bat. You're like, oh, that's going to be gone. And that's what he struggled with the most is the home run problem over in Japan. So the strikeout rates will be there. Will he be able to keep the ball in the ballpark? Yes, if the wind's blowing in 20 miles per hour. But those days at Wrigley when it's blowing out,
and he did mention, I think, after the game that he knew what the weather was. So he was pitching to that weather, which is an interesting point. To end on here with all small sample analysis, which is all analysis at this point in the season, the players also are aware of the unique conditions of their small sample, and they might be doing something weird for just that game. And Shota Imanaga, next time he pitches, if the wind's blowing out, maybe he's not going to try to go all 4 fly balls because he's aware of the conditions too. So it's just something to keep in mind with all of these unusual early season numbers. Well, was there something going on? Probably. Who knows?
They don't call him a philosopher for no reason, right?
What's a throwing philosopher,
the pitching
philosopher, something like that. Yeah,
cool.
What a good nickname. So excited to see his second start. I'm sure you are excited to go see your Tigers today, continuing their hot start. Do you want to make a fool of yourself with any predictions that will be quickly disproved?
Jack Flaherty gives up 5 home runs and no one's optimistic. How about that?
Oh, wow. Well,
just kidding.
You're hoping to be disproved with that one.
No. I will be. That's Jack Flaherty is somebody I'll be taking a closer look on these next few months. But no, this is the time where we can just enjoy baseball. The sample sizes are so small. Don't make any drastic moves, and let's just enjoy it and let's reconnect in a few weeks.
For sure. Hopefully we gave everybody some optimism, some names to maybe look into, and some reasons to believe in some teams who are off to some hot starts. Thank you very much for being my guest today, Marty. Do you want to tell everybody where they can find your work?
Yeah, of course. So you can find me each week on the Triple Play Fantasy Baseball podcast. And thanks again for having me on the show. It's truly an honor to be here.
It was an honor to have you. Thank you very much, Marty. Thank you, listeners. And we'll be back every day next week on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast.